Have you ever ended up with a knife that when you first saw it, maybe in video or in pictures or on a website, you thought, that's kind of cool, but boy, I don't know if I want to part with the cash. Not quite. And you just passed on it. And then one thing leads to another. Maybe an interesting set of circumstances come to pass and you find yourself owning it. And after you get it in hand for a while, you think, oh my, how did I ever overlook this? Well, I got one of those stories for you tonight, my friends, and we're going to talk about the Benchmade 484 Nakamura. Stick with me, guys. Hi gang, Rob here. It's the evening of February 2015. And yes, this is going to be a first impressions video on the most excellent Benchmade Nakamura Model 484. Would you look at that wicked, gorgeous spear point blade with an extremely cool swedge. Downright sexy, I would say. So what is this knife? Well, some of it's very familiar and some of it's very not. So what we got is a 3 1/8 inch spear point blade, flat ground from about 3/4 of its breadth down. An exquisitely heat treated Bohler M390 super steel. There's that Nakamura logo laser etched into that gorgeous blade. And you may notice, Benchmade is sort of famous for their kind of grinder satin with a light stone wash over the top. This M390 has a very beautiful stone wash and nary a grind line in sight. I think this is the nicest stone wash I've ever seen on a Benchmade knife. The blade's stock, about 113 thousandths of an inch by my caliper. Comes to about 22 to 25 thousandths of an inch thick behind the edge. This one, of course, has met Mr. Edge Pro on the TheApostleP sharpening bench. It's sharpened to a 15 degree per side secondary bevel with about an 18 or 19 degree micro. Just beautiful. Handle length, just 3 15/16. So less than an inch longer is handle than blade. Overall length, do the math, 7 1/16, I believe. Handle thickness I didn't measure, got to be about 1/2 inch though. Weight on this knife is dead on 3.5 ounces, which for a barely over 3-inch EDC blade may be a little heavy because we don't have real thick blade stock, but if you look inside, I think you can see why. There are no lightening holes milled into these rather thick stainless steel liners. So you have a knife here that feels fairly substantial in hand for its size. It's kind of a gentleman's folder almost, too small to be a full-blown tactical knife, although as we explore its ergonomics you'll see that it might function quite well in that role if you had no other options. But it's sort of a, what would nothing fancy say? You might call this an HEC blade, a high-end carry blade with its 3D machined and sort of bamboo textured satin finished G10 scales and polished stainless steel Benchmade split arrow pocket clip. My personal favorite, although I might prefer the Parkerized version on this knife. I may swap that out at some point. When I have to wipe the clip for fingerprints, maybe we need to change clips, I don't know. I did get this knife used, but gently so. You can see a little rub on the surface of the clip there. From my subscriber and sharpening customer, Jack. He had this knife, and there was one characteristic of it that just bugged him to no end. And he texted me the other day and was, wanting to know if I maybe could help sell it, and asked what he wanted for it. And again, I didn't pull the trigger, and it was far less than the knife retailed for, by the way. And he asked me if I had anything to trade, and I did. And it was a knife he was pretty stoked about, that I thought was a great knife, but just wasn't me. And so I ended up with this Nakamura. Jack ended up with my Odino. And I'm pretty pleased. They're about the same size and philosophy of use knife, kind of a slick, solid 3-inch EDC blade with a little bit of character, or both of them. Two very different approaches, of course. Let's look a little deeper here. The pivot, a little different than we're used to seeing from Benchmade. It is a pretty standard D-shaped pivot, and kind of a tiny one, I must say. A little larger than an 1/8 inch. I didn't measure it, but it's not 3/16. And the driver for that pivot is just a T6. And it's got these beautiful little stainless steel collars around the pivot on either side. Bank vault-like Benchmade access lock, and it functions very well on this particular knife. It isn't quite broken in. There's, if it doesn't, sort of snap in like it should on the ramp of the blade tang, I do get a little up and down play, but a little wiggle and it's gone. Kind of like sometimes an access lock Benchmade is like a triad lock on a cold steel. As they sort of wear in, they might have a little up and down play, and that sort of goes away as you use the knife. And this one, sometimes it has just a little. No side to side play. After sharpening, it's still sort of wearing in. I don't quite have a free dropper, but it's close. Still really slick action. Plenty acceptable. Let's look further. What do we see? Some very nice hourglass shaped shouldered standoffs. 1, 2, 3 of them, plus a stop pin. Interesting too. Notice the top of the blade. Got this little spike that sort of wraps around that stop pin. So when the knife is open, you don't see it. Just all blade leading up to the thumb ramp. Pretty slick look, I think, and also should give it a very solid and long wearing interface between the stop pin and the blade tang. It's always good when they do an inside radius on the blade where it contacts the outside radius of the stop pin and distributes the forces. Not that this is a hard use knife that it's going to make a big difference, just a nice design. Just a rather smart looking thing, isn't it? Let's take a look at, take a slow roll around this thing and just look at the attention to detail and fit and finish. Notice the symmetry in the swedges. See if I can get you a good dead on. They are perfection. Where they start, how deep they are, where they terminate. Everything is just dead on. Very well done blade. As we look around the perimeter of the knife where the scales meet the liners, everything is nice and flush. No tool marks in the liners, just nicely finished everywhere. Really well done. I did have my normal Benchmade issue, a plunge grind that protruded past the ricasso and made a funny cutting edge. I had to do just a minor ricasso enhancement. You can see my work there, I think. maybe had to remove about a 1/16 of the base of that edge so I could get a nice straight sharp edge all the way to the back. It looks pretty darn good though. You wouldn't know it unless I told you, probably. The jimping on this knife. Take a look at this, guys. Do you see how sharp and square that is? It's beautiful. I think this is the best jimping I've ever seen on a Benchmade knife. It is not so sharp that it hurts, not remotely, but you just touch your thumb to that and it stops it. This is how jimping should be, Benchmade. Do it again, please. Let's look at these thumb studs a minute. This is where the difficulty begins. This is why Jack wanted to get rid of the knife. And if you've watched other people's videos on the Nakamura, you may have heard that when you're carrying them and you extract from your pocket, these thumb studs have a habit of snagging on the edge of the pocket and opening the knife as you're trying to come out. And then, so you open the knife and it kind of sticks, and you get that, and you kind of dig down to retrieve the knife, find out why it's not coming out, and it's pretty easy to cut yourself. Now, Jack was thinking that it's because the thumb studs stick out so far, side to side. And as I've examined this knife, especially versus other axis lock Benchmades, because there's not a lot of retention. It's spring retention and it's kind of light. It's not like a detent ball where it's held fast. Most Benchmade axis lock knives, and you can see these studs are different than we're used to seeing. Most of them have those terraced pyramid studs, and they're kind of low profile, and they sit much closer to the scale. Sometimes they're almost touching, and your thumb just kind of ramps along the scale to find the thumb stud, which frankly I prefer. And these studs sort of sit up on this hump quite a ways from the scale, and they're kind of out here in no man's land, and they're easy to snag. Here's what I found though. With knife in pocket, like this, when coming out of the pocket, just give a little twist in this direction. Pocket materials here, just twist the studs away and come out. I've had this knife for a day, and I've already gotten used to doing that. It's, if your muscle memory wasn't there and you switched knives every day, and let's say you thought you had your 940 in pocket and you had your Nakamura instead, could you cut yourself? Yeah, you could. You could. Does it spoil the experience of owning this knife for me? No, not at all. It's something I'll get used to, and I'll endure it because the rest of the knife is so doggone good. I am not typically a big proponent of a lot of texture in scales of a knife, which is one of the reasons I wasn't super stoked about this knife to begin with. That, and it costs $190 or so. The other thing I don't really like on knives are finger grooves. You guys have heard me say this before. God made the human hand to hold on to a stick, and if the knife handle is a variation of a stick, the human hand can grasp it in various ways equally comfortably. When you put lots of grooves in a knife handle, it sort of requires your hand to be where the handle wants your hand to be, and I don't typically like that. That being said, even with the combination of some fairly confining finger grooves and a pretty short handle, this is a 4-finger knife, and I'll tell you what, you do have to have your hand sort of where it wants your hand, but when you have your hand there, I don't feel the grooves, and I am locked in with this nice finger guard and this super purposeful jimping, and this point, keeping my pinky right where it needs to be. It's a pretty good handle. Could you change it if you wanted to? Could you lose the finger grooves? Maybe keep this one and get rid of these 2 bumps? I think you could. Would the knife be better? Maybe. Am I going to do that to mine? I kind of don't think I will. I think I'm going to leave it just like it is. Because it kind of goes with the theme of the knife, doesn't it? The sort of Japanese theme with the grooves in the scales and the way they meet the finger grooves. I like it. And did I mention how beautiful the blade is? Oh, you guys know I'm more of a clip point guy, but does that look like a Spyderco stretch to you? It does to me. A super functional blade shape, and I think aesthetically pleasing as well, and it looks great on here. A lot like the 960 Osborne Benchmade blade, actually. So for a small knife, great ergos, a little bit of heft, 3.5 ounces, just makes it feel luxuriously heavy, I think. You know, could it be 2.5? Yeah, it could be, if you got rid of some steel in those liners, but it doesn't need to be. And it does kind of, you know, mess up the balance. It's a little bit butt heavy. If I try to balance in the first finger groove, it's not quite there. It's almost back on that first point, which makes it pretty hard to balance on camera. Let's see. It's right there. There. You can see it's just a little behind where your index finger is. Does it matter? No. Not with a handle that short. It just doesn't matter. You know, is it a little bit form over function? Maybe. Is that okay sometimes? Yeah, it is. Especially if it functions well. And let's see if it functions well, at least on some Natchez Shooter Supply catalog paper. Silent but deadly, isn't it? Yeah. That Bohler M390, pretty neat stuff. It is virtually a chemical carbon copy of Carpenter CTS204P and Latrobe 20CV. Just a great steel. Super corrosion resistant. Likes to run at about 60 to 62 Rockwell. Takes a very nice polish and a very keen edge. It's a bit of a fine grained steel, not big chunky vanadium carbides like S90V and some others. Nice fine grained steel. Look at the polish that takes. Just beautiful. And that corresponds to a super fine cutting edge, and it holds on to that edge for a good long time. A little bit of experience with Benchmade's M390 and its positive experience. You know, for an EDC blade that you're going to use for, you know, opening boxes, opening envelopes, breaking down boxes, cutting the occasional nylon zip tie, this is just going to be a great knife for you. The steel, especially in work like those nylon zip ties, guys don't realize how hard they are on a cutting edge. If you have a steel that likes to chip, like ZDP 189, when that strap tie is, you know, stressing on the blade, just a little bit of force to one side or the other, when that edge is buried in that nylon for a split second, it either yanks it over and rolls it or chips it out. A good tough, stable-edged steel like M390 is a great EDC blade material in situations like that. Stuff that has, you know, gives ZDP and VG10 fits for different reasons. ZDP chippy and VG10, you know, it rolls when you look at it cross-eyed. Not so M390. And you can get it wet and stick in your pocket, won't rust. I would say this for me is kind of a Sunday go-to-meeting knife, though. You know, a knife I'm going to carry when I'm wearing dress slacks and I want to, you know, look a little impressive when I draw my cutting tool out of my pocket for some mundane task. Is it going to replace my 940 as you know, at the top of the heap for EDC blades? No, but it has a lot of the same good qualities. And it sure is good looking. Have I mentioned how good looking it is? She's a keeper. Thought you guys would like to see this tonight. I'll keep you posted on how it holds up. But for now, that's all. Grace to you and peace, my friends, from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. And remember, the Word and my Benchmade Nakamura are sharp.